Hey everyone, it's Simi Shah, and welcome to Trailblazers. Through this series, we bring you trailblazing by South Asians and for South Asians. We're the torchbearers, sharing the stories of the leaders and innovators lighting the way across the South Asian diaspora. Hey everyone, today I have Priya Krishna joining me on the pod. Priya is what I like to call an expert foodie. She's a contributing writer for the New York Times, the New Yorker, and other esteemed outlets, and she has been for many years. She's also the author of 2 cookbooks, Indianish, which was named one of the top cookbooks in 2019, and also Ultimate Dining Hall Hacks, a college-themed cookbook. Priya is also a YouTube star known for fashioning her famous dishes on video for the Food Network and Bon Appetit's Test Kitchen's YouTube channel. As many of you know from our second newsletter, Priya bravely exited the Condé Nast-owned video platform in August in response to pay inequities for its POC contributors. She's a Dartmouth grad and a Dallas native, and throughout her career, she has expertly drawn inspiration from her South Asian roots in her food endeavors, which makes me all the more excited to talk to her today. Welcome to Trailblazers, Priya.
Thank you for having me.
So first and foremost, I have to ask, what is on your menu today?
Well, my partner just made almond croissants. I feel like that became my lunch and snack and maybe a pre-dinner as well.
I love it.
So I'm like, am I going to be eating almond croissants all day? Maybe.
I feel like whenever I watch your Instagram, I'm like, it just makes me hungry. That's like the immediate reaction I get. Everything looks so fabulous and so exciting. So going back to the beginning, I mean, when did you first fall in love with food?
I've been obsessed with food forever. Like, I remember I used to read menus for restaurants for fun. I used to just like sit and on our kitchen island watching my mom cook and just like was so like dazzled by like this idea of taking ingredients and turning into something where the whole was greater than the sum of its parts. But I never really thought it could be a career. It was just something I was like extremely enthusiastic about for as long as I can remember.
So then when did you decide to pursue it as a career?
Around college, I started a food call in my college newspaper that was sort of about taking the ingredients found in a dining hall and making them extraordinary. And I realized just from that 300-word assignment every week that I loved writing about food. I loved that food was like a way of talking about so many other issues. And I knew that I wanted to do something that was related to food. And after college, I was like, I'll do anything. I'll literally do anything as long as it touches the food world. I think I applied to work for like food delivery companies. I applied to restaurants. I applied everywhere. I just wanted to work in food.
Wow, that's amazing. I feel like people typically have a skill set or industry focus in that, okay, I'm going to go be an engineer and I'll go figure out topically what kind of engineer, or I'm going to be a doctor, I'll figure out what specialty. But it feels like you reversed the approach. You said, I want to do food and I'll figure out what within that fits the bill. That's pretty incredible. So I believe you had your first editorial internship at the Food Network. How did that come about?
I mean, that was I was tremendously privileged, but it was also such a fluke of events that happened. I really, really wanted to intern at the Food Network, and I went to like my career services for my college, and they noted that like the founder of the Food Network went to Dartmouth where I went to school.
Oh, wow.
And they were like, but we don't have his contact info. But I saw that he was a member of the class of 1953. And the class of 1953 had just donated a dining hall. And so I went to the head of Dartmouth Dining Services, who was my boss, and asked if he had the email. And he like checked the invite list for the opening of the class of 1953 Commons. And sure enough, he had this guy's email. So I just like cold emailed him. And he asked me to send my cover letter and resume. And then he like forwarded it along to, I think like literally to like the head of the Food Network. And then I got a call a few days later asking me to interview for the job. So that was awesome.
It's so funny to hear you say that, because I just feel like among many of the people that I've talked to over the years, there seems to be such a spontaneity attached to how they ended up where they are. And it seems like to some degree that was the case on your end as well, but still required you taking the initial step to reach out to that person. So after you had this internship, how did that lead you to pursue food writing and a career in journalism longer term?
I mean, after that internship, it was such a dreamy internship. I had an amazing boss, Michelle Buffardi, who kind of like let us write about whatever was exciting to us. I told her I was interested in exploring TV production. So she let me be a production assistant for a day on Iron Chef America. Like, it was just like such an amazing introduction to the world of food. I just sort of left the internship wanting more. And again, I knew that journalism was my passion, but I was like, I just want to live and breathe this industry however I can.
That's super interesting. You mentioned that you were willing to try any sort of role to just be in and around the food world. Did you ever consider being a chef? Was journalism the thing the whole time? What were some of those odd jobs that you tried to break into this world?
I literally was willing to do whatever. And my very first job was doing customer service for a food magazine called Lucky Peach.
Oh, wow.
So I like literally, if someone had like an issue with their subscription, they'd call me and I would like fix their address or anything like that. But I was like, you know what? This is a way in. And it was like, I was working customer service, but I also got to like, if my boss couldn't go to a restaurant opening, he would send me in his stead. I like sort of got to know the people in food media. I got to understand sort of the New York restaurant industry. Like it was a really great entry point.
Yeah, it sounds like it. To that end, what have been some of the lessons learned that you've carried with you from the early stages of your career, from those entry points?
I don't know. I was such a little shit when I started at Lucky Peach, like I was just like really buddy. I didn't really understand what a like professional corporate work environment was. Not to say that like professional work environments are great, but I definitely like don't think that I like understood what it meant to be like a business professional in the work environment. And I think I quickly like learned the ropes on that. I think I learned a lot from the fact that Lucky Peach was part of a larger hospitality group called Momofuku, and they had like such a specific approach to hospitality, which was this idea of like under promising and over delivering, which I feel like is something I've sort of always tried to take to just live my life, where you just, you can like achieve at this level, but you're like, okay, I will try my best. And then you like surprise them by performing at the high level. I feel like that was a lesson I learned really early on. Also, working customer service is a great thing, and you just immediately learn people skills and patience. So that was very helpful.
Yeah, that's great. It's funny because that's definitely a phrase that I heard when I was just beginning to start my career and had graduated. People would say, under promise, over deliver, do what you say you're going to do. So that's great. Something I'm curious about is you've actually written and talked a lot about how your mom has inspired your love of this world and your love of cooking and food, because growing up, she found these fun and savvy ways to integrate Indian food, but add a little bit of a Americanized modern twist to it. Can you share more about how your South Asian heritage has played into your love of this world?
I mean, for a while, the only food that I could make was Indian food. That's all I learned how to make, because I was like, well, I can like get Italian food at a restaurant, but my mom's Indian food, that I can't find in any restaurant. Like I need to be able to make that at home. So for me, it was just my mom's food was comfort, and my mom's food happened to be, her like distinct brand of Indian-ish food. That was what I craved when I moved to New York and when I left high school.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I feel like in one of your pieces, I was reading about how as a child, you struggled with that, about not having the same dinner plate as some of your peers. How did your thinking on that evolve over time?
I feel like I felt like a real immense amount of shame for a really, really long time. It's like I knew my mom's food was delicious, but I wish that it was more similar to everyone else's. Like I wish that I could like I felt like I was not a part of conversations, or even like being in the food world, talking to people about their upbringings. Like they're talking about roast chicken as if it was something everyone grew up with. But I was like, I've never had a roast chicken before, and it was just one of those things where I just felt like my identity was outside of the norm. But I now realize that media And the food world tends to center whiteness and make whiteness the norm, when in fact there are a plurality of identities in this country that cook in different ways.
Absolutely. And how did that give way to you writing your cookbook Indianish?
It's really funny. Like when I was working at Lucky Peach, like my Indian identity was not at all front and center until the head of our publication was working on a vegetable cookbook. And I remember like looking at the lineup of recipes and being like, why are there no Indian recipes in a vegetable cookbook? Like Indians make the best vegetables.
Yeah.
And so I emailed him and he was like, well, send me recipes. So I like sent him a bunch of my mom's recipes and he like loved all of them so much. He put all of them in the book. And the editor of that book also really loved my mom's recipes. She was like, I love how your mom's recipes are like rooted in Indian culture, but feel very weeknight. I mean, Indian food is weeknight food. It is accessible. They like show Indian food to be the accessible cuisine that it is. She was just like, I love how quick and simple yet flavorful your mom's food is. Do you think there's a whole cookbook here? And so I like pitched a cookbook where I was like, I am just going to document my mom's recipes. I'm not going to translate them because no one needs to make Indian food accessible when it already is accessible because billions of people are making it every single day. And yeah, that's kind of how the book came about. But like, I don't think I fully kind of expected what it was going to be when I pitched it. But the more I worked on it, the more it just like felt very right.
That makes a ton of sense. In past conversations I've had with authors, there seems to be this trend of when it's something that they're really passionate about or this story that was always meant to be written, it just sort of flows out of them, which is what it sounds like happened with you in this cookbook. I know that you also wrote another cookbook called Ultimate College Dining Hall Hacks, which I just have to hear about the ideation around that because I went to college, where it was incredibly difficult to be vegetarian from a dining hall perspective. So I want to hear all about the genesis of that project.
It was just like such a process. It was just like so unscientific. Like literally, I Googled how to write a cookbook and made a book proposal. And it was one of those things where I was just like, in my mind, it was going to become a book. It was sort of like I set an intention. And I also had extremely supportive parents who helped me stamp like 50 book proposals and bring them to the mailbox so that we could mail them out. And then gently told me every time I got a rejection letter from a different publishing company. The thing about publishing a book is all you need is one. And I was just like really determined to be a published cookbook author. And I felt like I really had something with this dining hall idea. And it was really fun. I got a small advance, but that small advance was what allowed me to move to New York and like accept a very low initial income. It gave me like the financial privilege and opportunity that I needed to enter the world of food media, which is a world that a lot of people are literally like financially unable to enter because it pays so little.
And to that end, I mean, what were some of the unexpected challenges you faced when entering the world of food media?
This is all very public now, but like I had a series of emotionally abusive bosses and that was awful. The restaurant industry is rife with harassment where lines are constantly being blurred. And I was constantly questioning whether something was like professional or normal or whether it was abnormal. That's like a really hard thing to go through, especially when you're a young woman in this industry. That was really tricky. And just like the idea of like entering an industry that's like really not meant for people who look like you and eat like you do.
Yeah. And I want to spend a second on that because it obviously goes to the decision that you made earlier this year over the summer to leave Bon Appetit because of pay inequities and their treatment of their POC contributors. I'm curious to hear what advice you have for other young women or people of color who are grappling with that sort of decision. They want to make it in this industry, but are struggling between whether they should suck it up or speak up and potentially leave a toxic environment. What would you say to them?
I mean, I just think if there's like something in your gut that tells you this is wrong, say something, speak up, tell your manager. If your manager doesn't do anything, go above your manager. I think there are so many things we just accept in this industry, and just like I think in working worlds in general, that certainly should not be the norms. And I feel like I was so nervous in my first work environment to call things out. And in fact, when I did report something, like nothing happened. So I just had this sense of like, what purpose is there in speaking out? But I mean, it's not great. Like, it's like something that just like literally requires having constant conversations. And it's really unfortunate that the onus often falls on POC to like initiate those conversations and be the ones to like clean up the messes. I hope that more non POC will like step up to fill in that burden. But it's hard. It's really exhausting. It's exhausting every day to be a person of color in the food world. And I say this as someone who has so many other kinds of privilege, whether that's having no debt, being cisgendered. It's hard for me. So it's just one of those things where, I mean, I think it's just like, our society is sort of still built to center whiteness. And in the food world, that really like manifests itself in very obvious and glaring ways. But I think like finding a community of folks who you do feel like you relate to, and finding places, increasingly this is happening, where the leaders aren't just like a big group of white men, is a great place to start. But just remember that a lot of the changes that you want, you're probably not going to see until the subsequent generation. And that can make you feel really hopeless. Certainly, like I have my points, but I think people don't realize how impactful it is when they say something, if even to like the POC editorial assistant just below you.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, but appreciate you sharing your thoughts and experiences. In the case of your decision to leave Bon Appetit's Test Kitchen YouTube channel, what gave you the courage to do that? What was the breaking point?
I mean, it was frankly like the community of POC video hosts. I really leaned on Sola, El Whaley, and Rick Martinez so often. Like, they were sort of like my support group, and we were talking to each other every single day, pretty much the entire summer. We were sharing with each other our communication with Condé Nast Entertainment. And I don't think I would have had the sort of courage to speak up if it weren't for my POC colleagues who were just like tremendously supportive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it would actually be helpful to trek back to the history here. How did you end up with Bon Appetit's Test Kitchen, becoming one of their YouTube stars? Can you walk me through that a little bit?
It was like very kind of happenstance. I had just joined Bon Appetit as a contributing writer, which meant I was coming in the office 1 or 2 days a week, contributing a few articles to the website and the magazine. And I had a book coming out, and I was approached by the head of video asking if I'd want to like demo some of the recipes from my cookbook for video. And, you know, I was like, well, I've got a book coming out. I didn't realize like the scope of the BA YouTube audience, but I felt like it would be a good promotional opportunity. But I also, once again, I found out later that it was like the other POC on staff who had championed me and like encouraged the head of video to give me a shot on video. So I'm so thankful for people like Jesse Sparks and Ryan Walker Hartshorn, who were assistant level positions, but like fighting this fight before I even got there.
That's amazing that you found that sort of solidarity and community in a world where it's not always easy to find it, because these voices aren't always in the room or welcomed into the room. What was it like for you to have the opportunity to bring not just South Asian culture, but other cultures to the forefront of food media in this way? Obviously, with respect to your Indian dishes, you speak Hindi and you put out these Indian recipes that are inspired by your mom's work. Can you share a little bit about your experience in that realm of uplifting and amplifying other cultures through food?
It's really interesting because I like wouldn't say that, like, obviously I wrote a book about Indian food, but like if you look at my scope of work, it's not just about Indian food. Like for me, I'm always looking at the underrepresented voices and trying to figure out how I can center those voices in my work. Those also happen to be the stories that I find to be the most interesting. But in the case of Indian food, I just felt like at a platform like BA, Indian food was so ignored, or a lot of the people who did think about Indian food sort of thought about it in terms of like the dishes we see in restaurants that are not representative of all of Indian food or Indian home cooking. And, it just felt like a really glaring hole. And I had this breadth of really amazing recipes. And I also wanted to be myself. I wanted to like show people the like broken Hindi that I speak, my love for Bollywood movies, my love for my family. I mean, all of that was not me being like, I want to put my culture at the forefront. It's just like, this is literally just who I am and how I am on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I have to tell you, from an audience perspective, I've really enjoyed following your work because of that. I mean, I've seen videos of yours where you're explaining the difference between Gutty and Curry, and you're making references to movies like Bend It Like Beckham, which obviously have significant cultural representation to people like me. And so having the opportunity to see someone that looks like you and is talking about things that you can identify with is a really powerful thing in a world where that doesn't typically exist. You spoke just now a little bit about engaging in this cultural exchange and having the opportunity to promote a variety of different cultures through food. Are there any particular memories in the kitchen or dishes that really just stick with you?
I mean, I remember the first time my Rachmami taught me how to make aloo paratha, and I nailed it on the first try. That was pretty amazing. I'm not used to like nailing anything on my first try. So like to know that I could roll perfectly round aloo parathas felt like some sort of strange fulfillment of a wish I didn't know I had, like the shock and awe of her when I sent her a picture of what my paratha looked like. I was like, this was worth it. This book was worth it for the look on her face.
Yeah, and that is not an easy dish to make.
Right. Actually, her version is not hard.
Okay, well, I might have to check that out because the quarantine project assigned to me by my family, of course, has been to become better about cooking some Indian dishes. So that might have to be next on the agenda. Something I've noticed over the course of your career is that you've collaborated a lot with other South Asians, be it with Padma Lakshmi or Maria Kamar. Hate Copy did the illustrations for your cookbook. What has been your experience having the opportunity to collaborate with other South Asian creatives?
It's been amazing. I especially love collaborating with South Asians who work in different spaces other than mine. Maria deals with a lot of the same issues I'm dealing with, but in the art world, like I had the opportunity to do an event with a bunch of Indian comedians, including Hari Kondabolu and Aparna Nancharla. And I was like, they deal with the same shit, just in the comedy world.
Yeah.
So it's really fun to like sort of recognize the universalities of the South Asian American experience in non-doctor engineer professions.
Yeah, and that comes around to this idea of tokenization and stereotypes across industries that South Asians and other people of color face. And speaking to that and your experience this summer and your reasons behind leaving Bon Appetit, has understanding that stereotyping, tokenization, what POC faced changed your view of the industry or your approach to it?
I think it just like made me, I think I can always be doing more. And it was just like a reminder that like this industry has so long to go and I want to spend my time in it fighting for representation from voices that have long been shut out. And so that to me means not just writing about underrepresented voices, but like how do I make sure that other journalists of color and specifically like Black and Indigenous journalists who are so underrepresented get opportunities. So I'm sort of always thinking about that and, what I can do to help others. When I get press requests, I often will send 3 additional names that they can interview instead of me. And I'm just like trying really, really hard as much as I can to pass the mic because I am in a position of extreme privilege. I have a platform. I will be fine, but others don't have that privilege and we need to spread the love.
That makes sense. And it seems like you've really tried to carve out this path to offering others any sort of platform that you've been given. And I want to spend some time on that because I think for other people in this position, it can be a bit of a nerve-wracking experience to leave a high-profile newsroom if they don't have a platform outside of it. And so I'm curious how you thought about your own platform in that context when you were making the decision to leave.
Yeah, I mean, it was really scary. I mean, it was terrifying. I feel like I had felt really unhappy there for a long time, but was afraid to lose that platform, which has like millions of subscribers. Like it is really, really, really scary to walk away. But I remember like talking to Sola and Rick, and we were just like, you know what? Opportunities will come our way. Us leaving it's more important to like make a statement and show people that we're not willing to just be underpaid. We need to just like all walk away and trust that we will be fine. That's the thing. Like I said, it takes a tremendous amount of privilege to be able to walk away. You need to have like savings in the bank. And all three of us were in a position, thankfully, to be able to do that. And we all trusted that other opportunities would come our way. And they have. And, you know, we're really grateful for them.
I really appreciate that you're sharing that and are so cognizant of it, because often when people tell the stories of the moments in which they made really big leaps in their careers like this one, they tend to omit those details. They forget about the privileges that are oftentimes required to be able to take these sorts of steps. So I appreciate you being so open and honest on that front. Based on what you experienced in this situation, what are the questions that you're going to ask yourself the next time you enter a newsroom or a new role where you might stay more permanently?
Does this leadership reflect what this country looks like? And if not, is there like a genuine willingness to change? Does this company feel agile, flexible? Are they willing to tell stories that aren't being told on other platforms? Are they willing to have their assumptions challenged about what easy weeknight, normal, everyday cooking looks like? You know, I think I'm happy to see that so many newsrooms are diversifying their staffs, but I think that we will have gotten somewhere where I start to see a lot of those people of color in leadership positions. That'll be very exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm a relative outsider in this world, but it does seem like newsrooms are due for a reckoning with respect to diversity and leadership, the masthead, and also just in the newsrooms and contributorship as well. I want to pivot a ton and ask you, who are some of the people that have served as inspiration to you throughout your career?
I just feel like I kind of stand on the shoulders of like the South Asian trailblazers who preceded me, like Mother Jaffrey, Julie Sani, and Padma Lakshmi. In the food world specifically, journalistically, I don't think I would be where I am without Tejal Rao, who's a staff writer or a critic at the New York Times and who opened so many doors for me and gave me so much advice when I needed it. I think a lot about how I wouldn't be where I was if there weren't people fighting these fights 1 decade, 2 decades ago. Every time I'm on a panel with Jessica B. Harris, who's like an unbelievable author, I think about what it must have been like to try and sell cookbooks about African-American foodways in the 1970s, and think about how much harder it was back then, and how much perhaps, you know, the fact that I was able to sell an Indian cookbook is reflective of the fact that these folks sold their books and those books did well and sort of opened the gate for other books to come in and succeed.
Absolutely. Appreciate the point on trailblazers, people who are really paving the path forward and paying it forward for the next generation. With respect to Jessica B. Harris, among the others that you mentioned, are there any moments in your career where you've just been like completely starstruck meeting someone and just like, or have a particular memory that really sticks with you?
Okay, this is really embarrassing, but the only time I can really remember being starstruck was when I was on a plane and I was headed to a debate tournament in Kentucky.
Okay.
And I was obsessed with the TV show Lost. This was like 2004. And I saw Terry O'Quinn, who plays John Locke, on the plane. And this is like really important because, you know, Lost is literally the pilot of Lost. They like fall out of a plane.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm in a plane with John Locke. And I asked the flight attendant to ask him to take a photo with me. And I made him write, there's like some numbers that are really significant in Lost. And I like made him write the numbers on my boarding pass and sign it. And that was like the last time that I truly lost my shit over a celebrity. And since then, I've been pretty good at keeping my cool. Oh, I also remember I saw Danielle Brooks. I saw her in a building headed to a dinner party. And I just thought she was extremely beautiful and cool.
That's amazing.
And someone I would be friends with.
I feel like some of my idols that I met Abhishek Bachchan on a plane. So there's clearly something to this meeting famous people on a plane.
Oh, wow.
And being very starstruck.
That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I have a couple more questions for you. I'm curious. I mean, honestly, in many ways, you're this paradigm of being able to turn a passion into a career, which is not that easy for most people. What advice do you have for young South Asians who are trying to do the same and have a passion area like yours and want to figure out a way to turn it into a longer term plan?
Just persistence is so key. You know, I feel like I was so frustrated by the fact that like all of my friends seem to have like an in to their industries, either through their parents or family friends. You know, my parents were both in software, so I had no in to the food industry. And so I sort of created my own opportunities. I did like deep Googling, sent really personalized emails asking people if they knew of any job opportunities. I was just like very, very hungry, and I was not afraid to follow up and to do so in a really thoughtful way. I think like a generic outreach email may not get you far, but a really personalized outreach email that sort of touches on why you're interested in talking to that person, why you're interested in working that publication, can really go a long way. And like, you know, the other thing that I did that I think is just for people entering the food industry is I said yes to everything. I like went to every event. I like did every panel, anything that like someone was like, do you want to tag along on this? I said yes. Like, you never know who you're going to meet at these things. So I think it's just like helpful to, we use a scary word for it, networking, but it's really just walking around places and drinking a glass of wine and eating hors d'oeuvres. It's not as scary as it seems.
I think that's great advice. And you mentioned your parents at the beginning. Something I did want to ask, it seems like you get to share in this part of your life with your family so much. What is that like?
It's really amazing, especially given that like at the beginning of this, my parents had no idea what a career in the food industry entailed, whether I would be even making a reasonable living. And so I think to be able to take them along on this journey and to have them be such a like personal part of who I am, you know, for like my mom and dad to be like stopped in Costco because people recognize them from my cookbook is really wonderful, because like I wouldn't be here without them. It wouldn't feel right any other way than to involve them in what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's amazing and really exciting because obviously you've pursued such a non-traditional path for I think what people see South Asian Americans pursuing. I'm curious, I feel like journalists often, and most journalists I talk to, I always ask this question, but I feel like they always have some iconic piece of journalism in their field that really resonates with them. Do you have anything that really sticks with you in that way?
There's a piece in the New Yorker that I think is being made into a book. It's called Crying in H Mart, and it's by the artist known as Japanese Breakfast. That is just like a perfect piece of writing to me. It's so personal. It's so emotional. It's like a little funny. It's just wonderful in every way.
Absolutely. Curious, you can eat one dish for the rest of time. What is it?
Yogurt. I could eat endless amounts of yogurt.
Really?
Yes.
That is
just
so
give me
not
a
what I
fridge filled
expected.
with yogurt. Yeah, you expect me to be like some composed dish? No, just yogurt. That's it.
That's amazing. I love the simplicity. I have one last question for you. I'm just curious. What's next for you?
You know, I'm kind of just taking things as they come. I'm still contributing regularly to the New York Times. I'm doing video with the Food Network and with the New York Times, which has been really, really exciting. I just turned in a draft of a cookbook that I'm co-writing with the chef David Chang about why we should not follow recipes and follow our instincts. So that's very exciting. And yeah, we'll see what happens after that.
Super, super exciting. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, Priya. This was awesome. I think your story really serves as an inspiration to many people, especially young South Asians. So really appreciate you taking the time.
Of course. Thanks for thinking of me.
This is a podcast from Trailblazers Media. For more content on South Asian trailblazing, follow us at South Asian Trailblazers on Instagram and Facebook.